You wear your watch to tell time. I wear my watch to tell you how valuable my time is.
What's up, closers? It's your favorite producer, Ben. This week, we interview Adam Hodak, one of the best industry bars in Denver, the L. Unfortunately, these two dumbasses, as much as they are a pretty face, they can't do anything without me. So they lost about 7 minutes of the audio. So, unfortunately, we're giving you this little disclaimer just to be upfront with you. So, what he was talking about was he's done everything from being an award-winning mixologist, beverage director for the first craft cocktail bar in town, consultant for cocktail programs across the country, and owner of several cocktail bars throughout Denver. We pick up where Adam is describing how he got his first bartending gig in college at a local Jack and Coke spot called Station 1 in Springfield, Ohio. He would go there and drink and would hound the bar manager for a job. After weeks, she finally called him when he was in the middle of class and said, "If you can be here in 20 minutes, you have a job." He skipped class, trained open to close for 2 weeks with no pay. We're going to pick up on his last training shift and his story as it goes on.
I don't know. I believe so.
God, I hope so. Right here.
God, I hope so too.
Yeah, we're not telling that. We're not telling the origin story again.
No, we're not. Okay, continue. So,
yeah.
No, so the last night of training was Sunday night, and Lauren, I didn't think I'd remember her name. Lauren, an outgoing bartender, and I were working together on my last training shift, and it was like right at the end of school, so everybody's out, right? Like in crazy night, and up to this point, the other bartenders and I, after about my first week of training, we had come to an okay assessment where it was like, listen, I was getting, my training wages, which were like, I don't know, $8 an hour at the time,
right,
and they were making like $2 an hour. So we'd like set that money aside, and then we would split the tips from there because I was, we rang on our own registers, and I was putting up, equal numbers.
Yeah.
So they felt okay with it. However, they didn't need to do that. That was them being good people, fair people.
Yeah, they're like, you've just been working all this time.
Yeah, you've been working this time.
Yeah.
I'm putting up like, hundreds, if not like $1,000. And on the last night, I was with Lauren. I actually outsold Lauren. It was like 900 something to like her like 860. And we're in the back. It's like 3:30, 4 a.m. and she's counting out the tips. She hands me a 20, takes like $500 and is like, "Thanks, Adam, later." And I never saw her again. And I was like, oh, man, that burns. Yeah, that burned. Anyways, so, So, and then I bartended at McMurray's for like 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah. That seems like the most common story of bartending is you have to like, it's funny when people are like, "Oh, did you go to bartending school?"
Like,
no, I
just
wanted to, and I just went for it, and then found my way in, and then you get kind of like this period of where hazing almost. It feels like in your training, especially starting somewhere like there where you're like packed with fucking college kids.
Oh yeah,
thrown into the fucking fire, man. Like that is a rough crowd to deal with for a first bartender.
Well, it's also so like McMurray's was like wild because again it was like half town, half college.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was like the first bar fights I ever got into were defending the bar there.
Yeah.
Let's see, I was threatened to get shot by somebody that had just gotten out of jail for shooting somebody. He's like, "I'm going to come back here and I'm going to shoot you." And I was like, "I actually believe you. Please don't." Like Springfield, Ohio, like besides, that's where, ironically, they're eating all the cats and the dogs. Did not have that on my bingo card. That where I went to college was also where Haitians were split roasting small animals that are hard to catch and fight back. I don't fucking know about that, but so you know how most cities you go to, they'll be like, "Stay away from the south side" or "Stay away from the west side." And Springfield, Ohio was more or less like, stick to the east side, and then like that's good, and then you're good there, and then like the rest of the town just kind of just sucks a little bit. Anyways, shout out Springfield.
There we go. Yeah. So when you after you bartended there, did you think you were going to continue to bartend or?
Yeah, so this is kind of the weird thing. I did not. So I had a whole thing in college leading up to my senior year. So I started bartending junior year. Then my senior year, first semester senior year of college, I was on track to graduate in 4 years. I had I had like a baby fit. Like, oh, my parents made decisions for me and didn't let me make my own decisions. Yeah.
A little crisis.
Fuck you for sending me to college and all these nice things you did for me.
Yeah.
So I just didn't go to class because at this point also I was fiscally independent from my parents. Mm-hmm. So like I'm 22 at the time, and I'm like, I'm good. I'm fucking like bartending Springfield, Ohio, rich. Like I'm making my rent in one night. Yeah. I'm bartending 4 nights a week. Like what do you want to do? Yeah, let's do it. Like I've got all the hundreds I need right now.
I have hundreds of dollars.
I have so many hundreds of dollars and more hundreds coming in tomorrow. And so I don't go to school for an entire semester. Like I just didn't drop out. I just didn't go to class. So I got a perfect score that semester. I got 0.0.
Wow.
Which is good. Yeah, a lot of people call out 4 O's. Like call out 00. Like Robert, I have Robert Parrish and me, like the only 2 famous 00 people. So I get kicked out of school because it was like automatically, expelled.
Yeah.
Anyways, I go home for like an hour to talk to my parents about my report card, which is also weird when you're like 22 years old having a conversation about a report card.
I think the time, whenever the one time I got on the president's list was also the one time my parents like found out I was smoking weed at their house. I was like, they were like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, well, I got on the president's list." So it was a real balanced situation. But yeah, it was still weird, to talk about.
Yeah, it is. I think they saw it as like 2 more zeros on the bill for school. But anyways, right. So I go back to school, and then I end up going back to school and I end up graduating. But that's why I ended up spending so long in college bartending. I got my business degree. I moved out here with a bunch of kids that graduated within a few years of each other.
So you pretty much like left college there and came straight to Denver.
Yeah. I left my apartment. I was living in a funeral home at the time.
Okay.
Which was like a 1880s, like massive mansion funeral home that was right next to the bar.
With like an apartment, or you just?
No, yeah, I was in an apartment.
You couldn't be there when the.
No, I was in the
services.
People, it was really funny because people would be like, oh, how creepy is it to like live in a funeral home? And I was like, it's not creepy. And they're like, are there ghosts? And I was like, I don't think you understand this. It's like, this is where dead people were, not where dead people came from.
Right.
Like,
That's not how ghosts work.
Yeah, this was they weren't creating their own like work for them at the funeral home. It wasn't like a murder and funeral home, just the funeral part.
Yeah, they stopped by there. That's not where they are. That's not where they started.
Yeah,
they just
exactly.
visited.
Yeah, just very, very, very quickly. They moved after McMurray's, which burned down a few years after I left. They moved the bar into the funeral home, and I guess my old bedroom became the bar. I never got to see it. It's permanently closed since the O'Neills got rid of it after their dad died. But anyways, so after I like literally like last 2 shifts of like work at McMurray's, like a week later, I drive out to Denver, and it was like I moved out here in like 06, 07. Mm-hmm. And I had a business degree, so I just assumed I'd get into like, middle management, like get fat, bald, and, hate my life.
Yeah, stay with the same company for the rest of your life and fucking, just do a 9 to 5.
Yeah. I was applying for all these fucking jobs. And like I had like an interview with like Pete's Coffee as an assistant manager. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget, like I met with the owner, and like he had like this stupid little fucking dog with him. And I was like, I don't really know if like a guy that's like needs this little dog at his office is like a guy I want to work for.
Sure.
Like it's just nothing sexy about like
this guy with a small dog.
Yeah, like if you got like a big aggressive dog or like a Jaguar or a Bobcat. Sure, like Lion King.
I like that it was the type of dog that really set you
It was
up.
just the type of dog. It's just
Like, if this had been a German Shepherd or a Doberman,
yeah, you're like, okay.
I'd have signed up in a heartbeat.
Yeah, that's like tough. So not tough. Yeah. And I'll never forget. I get this call, and this like his underling, and mind you, like I've like bartended high volume for 3 years. I have an actual business degree, and I'm applying to be like an assistant manager of like a not Starbucks, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like whatever it is, it's not a Starbucks.
Right.
And he's like, they're like, we don't know if you have like enough background. We'd like to start you out as a barista.
Oh, Jesus.
And then see you like really work up from there. And I was like, I don't want like, I'm not trying to work up from barista to assistant manager.
Yeah.
So I'll never forget, of all people, I was talking to my mom. It was like 2 months in, and I was just kind of lamenting, like sending out like hundreds of resumes, you know, a week, and just like hearing back from some, going to interviews, and just being like, God. And she was like, you know, I had built up like, you know, enough money that I wasn't like worried about living.
Right.
And she was like, you could always bartend. And like, you know, I loved cooking. I loved the Food Network. I loved bartending. Mm-hmm. And then like, what are the other, so I ended up applying to work at this restaurant in downtown Denver called Osteria Marco. Mm-hmm. Okay. I had looked up Frank Bonanno, the owner of it, and like had seen like some good acclaim with his restaurants and whatnot. And I was like, okay. I was like, yeah, I could just bartend part-time or whatever. Like, you know, whatever. You know, that'll be fun. Yeah. And it's in downtown Denver. And I remember, like, so I was a big marijuana smoker towards the end of my college career.
Of course.
So I got rheumatoid arthritis when I was 23 years old, like real bad. And I have like a specific kind, so it took me like 9 months to get a full diagnosis or whatever and get on medication. And like, I was like incapacitated basically. And one of my friends was like, yeah, I hadn't smoked weed in probably like 6-8 months. And he was like, why don't you try smoking some weed, man? And I was like, fuck. At this point, I had tried every painkiller on the planet. I tried everything to make myself feel better, and nothing worked. And I remember like smoking a joint or something, and then like just like fucking collapsing into a lazy boy and falling asleep. And I was like, oh my God. So I became a marijuana smoker at that point. And I always smoked before and after shift when I bartended. I'd gone sober, well, not smoke. Well, I was also medically sober when I moved out here. Like I didn't drink because I was on medication that was like real hard on my liver.
Right.
So I was medically sober for about 3 years when I first moved here. Like between like leaving Ohio and coming here. Not that I couldn't drink. I just like you're always getting tested to see where your liver numbers are, and so like, anyways, so I like stopped smoking weed, and it's like, well, if I'm gonna start working in a bar again, like I certainly have to show up to this interview high, right? Like, they're gonna like, I can't.
That's just be who you are.
Yeah, like
that
so, like
because they'll never find out if they meet you and you're stoned.
If you show up stoned, and then you're always stoned, you're fine. If you show up fucking straight-eyed, and then the next day you showed up goofy-eyed, they're like, there's something different. As long as different is normal, then different is fine. Anyways,
exactly.
So
yeah, it's just
it's the same
people
thing.
Don't just a guy with red eyes.
Yeah. If you're going to study for the test high, you got to take the test.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah,
it's the same exact thing. So I apply for the job. I get brought in. Oh man, these are such fun. I haven't retold these stories in so long. And so I get brought into the interview. It's downtown Denver. I have no idea. I've never been to downtown Denver. I've lived here for like 2 months. I park like 5 blocks away.
It's on like Larimer Square, right?
It's Larimer Square, and I park.
That's when I was.
Dude, I park on like California.
Oh no.
And then there's like construction, so I'm trying to walk, and like I'm all sweaty. It's like August, and I get in, and like the restaurant's under construction, or like it's under renovation, like they're flipping it, and I show up, and there's like 3 people interviewing me for this, and I start just explaining like I had a bartender resume, and it was like, you know, it was broken down to like basically sales volume, average cost of drink, and then like total operation hours. So basically like, you know, expressing, you know, in numbers and like that, you know, I'm a fast bartender.
Right.
Like this is what I can produce.
Yeah.
I didn't know even the word industry existed. Like I didn't know what that was. I didn't know, like I just bartended at one bar that was a Jack and Coke bar, and like that was it. Like we had plastic cups. We didn't make cocktails.
Right.
And here I am in this like what's supposed to be a very, very nice part of Denver, I guess. And like, and I see like these wine walls. And I will say there was a class I took in college that saved my life. So the only reason I can say that like ultimately like this singular class is why I'm here today. So it's called the Geography of Wine. And it was a geography professor that was also a big wine guy. And so it was a class with a lab. I took it my last summer, and it was a 5-credit course, and the one lab credit was an hour wine tasting at the end of every class.
Oh, come on.
It was amazing.
Oh, no.
And so we taste through like something like 120, 130 wines, and then you know, everyone can laugh, but Ohio actually has some AVAs. And so we went and visited a couple like wineries in Ohio on on like a, you know, class trip at the end of it. Right. Anyways, so I show up to this interview. There's like an advanced somm interviewing me, and then like Frank's wife, and then like another like industry vet that's like, you know, his name was Chris Gregory. Shout out Chris Gregory, and Ryan Gaudan. That were there, and they're like industry vets working in like nice restaurants and like traveling and all this shit.
Yeah.
And they started asking me all these questions about like things that I should know that I never served food. We didn't sell food. Like, what do you mean? Like, and I started getting asked questions about wine, and I had just enough knowledge to be like, you know, I had just enough knowledge to sit there and be like, I'm not an idiot. Like,
You know what a Pinot Noir is?
Sure,
You know,
yeah.
Ronan.
And also, I did answer one question. I got asked he says, Chris Gregory looks at me and he goes, how would you make a perfect Manhattan? I looked at him, I go, exactly the way you would want it. And he was like, that answer is why you got hired. He goes, because it shows that you have no idea what you're doing, but that you're willing to just go ahead and just execute it.
Yeah.
And I was like, and then he like gave me the recipe for a perfect Manhattan, which is the worst Manhattan variation ever.
Dude, I think there's something to that though, where it is, you know, when people are hiring for restaurants, you don't necessarily want the like bartender that like thinks they're the shit and knows all their stuff, and like that they actually know more than you and that you're stupid.
Dude, retraining or untraining is like so I became the interviewer,
Right.
like relatively quick, and I'll never forget my like favorite question used to be for people, you know, what's your spirits knowledge, like, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, so the way I would answer that, so after having like opened up like cocktail bar, like that was like, you know, we got like we were listed top 30 bars in the world. We were like top 10 cocktail bars in America, like Travel and Leisure.
Talking about Green
like,
Russell,
Green
right?
Russell, yeah. So I own this, and like I've spent a lot of time researching and studying and things like that. The way if somebody were to be like, what's your spirits knowledge on a scale of 1 to 10? I probably would have said somewhere around like a 6. Like if you're talking about all the spirits in the whole world, but like a layperson's 10. Let's say that would be it.
Yeah.
So the number one answer I would get when I asked this question was like 7, 8. And so then I just immediately, like if you start that high, I go, okay, what are the 5 regions of Scotland? Like, okay, if you're like that's like not even a hard question for like a 4 or 5 to know what the 5 regions of Scotland are. But like if you're like sitting there at 7 or 8, so I was interviewing this kid for a job at Green Russell, and he was like 7 or 8, and I was like, I asked that question. He's like, he didn't even get one. He's like, well, I've just been working in beer. And I was like, okay, what's the difference between like a stout and a porter? And like I see the beads of sweat start to, because like that's the thing. Like I'm not like I don't want somebody that thinks they know everything in the world. We just want somebody that like can sit there and try to like. Are you going to be somebody that like cares, wants to learn, and make life good for people? So, anyways, that's how I ended up at Osteria Marco, and then very soon into Osteria Marco. This is like '08. The recession hit, but Denver kind of was like recession-proof, essentially.
Right.
And there were all these drink competitions that were happening. And I started doing drink competitions around town. And I quickly become the bridesmaid. Like, I came in second all the fucking time.
Yeah, I guess that because I don't know what people call it. I've just heard the term like the modern cocktail renaissance. That would have been like early 2000s.
Yeah.
So this would have been as things were really starting to like hit their stride and start to leave places like New York and like start to expand as far as like people really getting back into classic cocktails.
Yeah.
And those competitions would have been all over the place.
I get goosebumps thinking about it because technically it was 99. Technically it was New Year's Eve 99 that Milk and Honey opened in New York. Okay, so that's the inception point for the modern cocktail revival in America. Okay, and then you have Violet Hour in Chicago. You have Bourbon and Branch in San Francisco, and then you got like Zigzag up in Washington, and Seattle. But it has its like place. Those three were the three that like set it off, like sort of in that domino flip. And by '08, you don't have it here. Like, so I'll talk about so Sean Kenyon, local barman. He was working at a restaurant called Steuben's at the time, and
Still there?
still there. Yeah. And he was the bar manager, and he had on the menu. I'll never forget because it was like him and I were in a bunch of competitions and. I opened up Green Russell like a year before he opened up Williams and Graham. He won the marathon though, still there. Green Russell, no longer there. He had like on the menu at Steuben's because we didn't have cocktail bars.
Right.
All Denver had were dive bars, and then we had like bad martini club bars.
Sure.
So it was like real ugly. So your restaurants were getting names for bartenders, which was, that's kind of cool. Yeah. And he had a Figgy Manhattan on his menu. And it was like, and I'll never forget, like, it had like thick sugar crystals, like on the rim, like in this goblet of a martini glass, like 11, 12 ounce martini glass. And anyways, I remember going in to try this Figgy Manhattan, and I was just like, God, this is goddamn sweetest. Because figs are like the sweetest fruits, and it's just like soaking in this jar and like ladled out. And I was like, but like that's like, and it's not like nobody in Denver knew. There was no like, the context of Denver was like,
beer and
like,
shop places.
Like, dude, they were still like. Grand Marnier and Tuaca.
Oh God!
You're like getting after it. So, anyways, so that's where we were. And like when I started at Osteria, like, we were like, there was like, I didn't do the first menu there. My bar manager did at the time, and it was just like childish. Like, like it was awesome. It was great. Like, if only you could go back to sell like cocktails like that. Like,
Now it's even your like average cocktail. Like consumer
is more
like, probably like has a bar at their house.
And
They either think they know or they literally do know. Like,
do you think that that the show Mad Men had anything to do with that, like taking off across the world of going back to those classics?
I would say all like so. I always like to say. Like, nothing's 100%, right?
Sure.
Everything's like a piece of a pie.
Yeah.
Any kind of visual where that's being... It's like, if you look at, like, food...
Yeah.
Like, I think of, like, modern Asian. I think of, like, Ming.
Right.
Like, watching, like, him, like, crush, like, the first time, like, I learned, like how to make proper, like... Or at least what I believed at the time was proper fried rice. Was, like, watching that. Like, Julia Childs, like...
Yeah.
Like, bringing, like, these, like getting out of, like... what was like contemporary American fare. It doesn't necessarily start just with TV, but when media is involved, it has to be a part of it because you see that and then you're like, oh, I want that. And to the point, like today, so I consult out in Boise currently, and like the owners, good owners, they're in their 50s. They send me pictures of shit from Instagram to be like, can we do this? Because they're taking that in, and they're seeing the visuals, and then like one of them will be like, can we do caviar, like homemade, like, spherification? And like I got real into like molecular gastronomy, and I'll be like, yeah, like we can, but like let me show you why it's not what you want. And so then we'll make it and we'll go through it. But yeah, I would say like anything like Mad Men, yeah, like having that visual of that, like the proper cocktail and things of that nature, absolutely. And where did the idea for that come from? I guarantee you it came from drinking in nice bars.
Yeah.
In New York, in Chicago, in San Francisco, and being exposed to it, and then those writers going like, no, this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it like with like, was it Dick Wolf and like all those like NCI, they're bringing like actual police and stuff like that to be like on
consultants.
And so you know that that's where you're getting that stuff from. So yeah,
that's fascinating, man. Was there a moment where you was it a moment that you realized you loved bartending, loved the industry, and wanted to continue to do this, or in this process of learning craft cocktails, or was it kind of a gradual thing where all of a sudden you were like, God damn?
So I had this moment in a 42 below competition, 42 below vodka competition. My man Mark Stoddard used to live in Boulder, opened up some cool shit up there. He ended up winning the competition. I ended up making it out to New York. So it was like, I want to say 20, there were 20 bartenders. It was like a 10-city competition. 20 went to New York. And you ended up, from those 20, you ended up with the top 3. The top 3 went to New Zealand to get to the final competition. Mark Sauter ended up winning it. He then ended up leaving Boulder and becoming like a national brand ambassador for Hendrix and stuff for a bunch of years and things of that nature. So we're in New York and we're staying together, and we're in the Ace Hotel. Was not my first trip to New York, but this was like my first kind of real baller trip. It's like 2010. It was right before I opened Green Russell. Yeah, right before I opened Green Russell, I think. And but I have become the beverage director for Banana Concepts, which only had 4 concepts at the time. And I had opened up this Asian noodle joint called Bones, and a part of that was I started making all these house-made stuff. So my dad was a history teacher for 35 years, and it rubbed off on me. So I started collecting classic cocktail books, so I would describe my style of bartending as real late 1800s, early 1900s.
So you were just working in the industry, and so you were taking an interest in learning more. Since you were bartending in a restaurant, you were like, oh, I'm just going to learn this shit. So it's just kind of your natural progression.
So we all have idle time in restaurants and bars, and my idle time was kind of just spent looking at different products and kind of trying to learn about them and see what was going on. Yeah. So I started collecting these cocktail books, and start getting into this shit, and then I started making really old school tonics and bitters, and I started doing that that kind of thing. And I'd made a lemongrass tonic for the Asian restaurant, and I ended up in this 42 below competition making it to the finals with a gin and tonic. Wow. And which I felt pretty good about. It was a really, really baller, very, very nice lemongrass, kaffir lime tonic, and then I hollowed out lemongrass to make straws from the lemongrass. It's a very, very simple cocktail. I thought I deserved to win, but anyways, I didn't. But during that trip, we took two nights. We ended up at Milk and Honey, and on the second night, the night that Mark won, we're there, and Sammy was there. Sammy and Michael, who are now the owners of it, it's been rebranded to Attaboy, and they opened an Attaboy in Nashville. Phenomenal. They really took. They were the second guard in Milk and Honey, and so they're when Milk and Honey really, really became a thing, they were the two behind the helm. And Milk and Honey did it right. They were making their own ice. They were doing their own everything. And he's like, all right, boys, we're going to lock it in. So right about 1:30, 2 in the morning, they just locked the door. There were 5 of us in there. and they just made drinks for us for like the next like 2.5 hours. So like 4:35 in the morning, he's like, all right, boys, we got to get home. All right, he goes, and he was like, I won the competition last year to Mark. He's like, because he had 142 below the year before. He goes, all right. He's like, all right, boys. So like, I think we gave him like $200, $250, and you know, like tip for like, because you know, it was like greatest experience ever.
Right.
That was the experience that like set off like. So when I opened Green Russell, I was like, this is how you do it. Like,
Right.
So if Green Russell had any like inception point, the inception point would have been milk and honey.
Right.
So that's why we cut ice to order and all this other shit. We just happen to be like, I don't know, 5 times bigger than milk and honey.
Yeah.
Right.
That was an awesome space. That was one of the first.
Yeah.
I had been to cocktail bars, but as someone in my industry experience, where I had bartended just like a little bit, like an Olive Garden. You know, but going in there and seeing just how not only complete, like cool the space was, because it was like a space that was the result of
It was like historic.
Prohibition.
Yeah.
I don't know what that space exactly was.
No, it wasn't.
But like that sort of underground.
Yeah,
sort of,
yeah.
Like this is out of the way, so that
Yeah.
people used to be able to, get away during Prohibition with alcohol. But like it's just sort of bartenders that I think that I think they blew fire the first time I was there. So, yeah, but I was just like, oh, there's just like obviously all these special ingredients, infusions that everyone knew. Like it was the first like time I had a bartender's choice, that sort of thing. It was like, oh, like this is a whole career someone could have, not just knowing how to make a margarita kind of thing behind a bar at a restaurant.
No, it's and like, it's one of those things where, my hope was to continue carrying a torch that had already been lit, with the idea of like really, really like great cocktails, like real cocktails, authentic, like now I'm not a crazy person either. Like I don't believe a lot of classic, quote unquote classic cocktails are great as like specced out.
Yeah.
Because they just like tastes evolve, things evolve. Like there are some perfect cocktails, like a Negroni is like my cocktail of choice. I think it's a perfect cocktail. A lot of things like that are great. But what it really showed, like what like Milk and Honey and like all these other great bars showed, was that like you can produce something like, okay, so if we're distilling things down, wine is the simplest form of spirituitous beverage, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Right? Like now, and you watch the movie Som, and you see that douchebag can spin in that glass, and like fucking like boysenberry, lemon, fucking fuck off.
Yeah.
Like just fuck off. Like if you have to have like the nose of a fucking like bloodhound to decipher the flavors within, like I'm sorry, like it just is the simplest form because it's also the simplest base. Mm-hmm. It's a singularity, right? Like that's what wine is.
It's just grape juice.
It's just fermented grapes. Right. Sure. And listen, I could sit down with a Som and fucking talk for 22 hours about the process and about how about all kinds of things, but ultimately it is the simplest form. Mm-hmm. And I could just sort of tell in like 2010 after having this cocktail experience at Milk and Honey and like knowing what I was just doing in like my very, very small restaurant, and then kind of building out programs and also talking with Soms. Like, so I took the Som exam like before it became 4 tests. Mm-hmm. And I was in there and I went to Southern and Glacier, had a class, and they employed a bunch of master Soms. I think at the time there were like 120 master Soms in the whole world. And there's like 5 of them in this room teaching us. And like I'm in there and there's like 6 other like contemporary bar friends of mine that we're all helming either individual or multiple beverage programs at this time, with up and coming restaurant groups. And I at this point, like I'm going to like cocktail conferences, okay? And there's a master Som that gets a question from like a sales rep about absinthe. Okay, so absinthe had just come back onto the market, and he didn't know that absinthe was technically now sort of re-legalized is kind of, it was in like a gray area because of the idea that it was psychoactive. Right? So it had been in like this weird loophole.
So I think it was only 2019 that like
The wormwood.
No. It was like
again, as
was
far as
earlier
like
than
some
that.
of those imported products were allowed. Or?
well, okay. So imported products have. So I don't want to go too deep down this rabbit hole. I will. I mean, the problem is I could easily go down this rabbit hole forever.
We're here for whatever you get excited about.
Yeah.
So with imported products, if you were not imported, like if you hadn't previously been imported, like for instance, we'll use chartreuse as an example. Chartreuse has 130 herbs and whatever. Okay. There's this thing called the GRAS list or the GRAS list, the generally regarded as safe list. Okay. So that's the list of things that if you produce something that's consumed from that list, it's legal. Chartreuse was imported long enough ago before that was that they don't have to disclose their recipe. So you don't know
like
what's in
grandfathered
it.
in.
So
Yeah,
they're
right.
grandfathered in. Okay. Ironically, I have some Fernet bottles that were made in New York City because Fernet used to have a distillery in Tribeca, and those actually list some of the ingredients of Fernet on it. It's pretty cool. But if you're talking about a product that was in Europe that didn't make it into America until X amount of days, that would have been specifically because they chose to or not to share the recipe because they hadn't previously been imported and distributed here. So, but I think it was around right around 2010 that Lucid, ironically the silliest of all absinthe bottles, by a gentleman, molecular scientist named Teddy Bro from out of Louisiana. Teddy Bro, I've seen Teddy Bro speak a couple times. I've had some drinks with him a few times. When he was trying to explain how smart he was, this is one of my favorite. Like he wasn't. Listen, you know how you, like when you're around somebody that's really, really smart and they don't necessarily share it. That's the smartest kind of person you'd want to be around.
Yeah.
He was doing a presentation trying to explain his expertise, and he's like, the easiest way for me to explain what I do is he's like, you could fill the Superdome with water. He's like, you could pour in a gallon of oil. He's like, you could take a sample of that water, give it to me. He's like, I could tell you how much oil is in the Superdome. I could tell you where that oil's from. I could tell you what that oil was like what like fucking octane or level. He's like, that's what I did before I did this. So he's the one that got absinthe back in America.
Yeah.
So we're sitting here, our cocktail nerds, 6 of like 50 people in this room, have all had absinthe, real absinthe. Mm-hmm. We know what it is. We know the lore and the reasoning behind its all the bullshit.
Yeah, the smear campaign.
The
for the
smear
wine
campaign,
companies
it was a smear
in
campaign
France,
from wine companies. Yeah, it literally boils
that
down.
backfired, right?
It boils
like, it'll
down.
make you trip. They're like, great, can I have 2 more?
Yeah, exactly. But dude, I always try to explain this to people. I'm like, if you've ever taken psychedelics, okay, now think about getting super fucked up and tripping. Those two things, nobody wants that. Like that's not like nobody's like, oh man, I just hit some acid. Give me a bottle of booze to chase it with. That's not like, no, that doesn't make it through history. Like what? The wine industry. Yeah, after coming back. Is the whole reason behind the smear campaign, but and then it progressed to America, and it was like, that's how so it gets re-legalized, and we're sitting there, and there's a master sommelier. I will not say who the master sommelier is. He's a friend, but he's like the closest thing to absinthe in America is chartreuse, and like I just see like we all like catch eyes and we're like looking around the room like, what are you talking about? Those two things are not like really anywhere near. I mean, like they're not really near each other. Like, I mean, like if we're being silly, like gin would be closer to absinthe than chartreuse because they're both distilled spirits. But even that's stupid.
I guess all liquids have water in them. You could say them,
right?
Well, those are similar because they're
wet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those are wet.
So this is like the state of like SOMs and stuff. And then like I end up being like real tight. Like I take my test, I pass my test. I was like doing it on like, we were building a restaurant. And I'm like taking this fucking test. So it was like opening, closing, breaking down, all this crazy shit. And, you talk to these master SOMs and you realize one thing about master SOMs. And I take nothing away from them. I say this with all due respect. This is my favorite thing to say before you just like absolutely slander,
disrespectful,
slander somebody. It's like you need like a 60 to pass it. It's like that's not a good. I don't like.
Well, it plays well for the whole industry, right? Because you really have to bullshit your way into just about everything.
But if you're like if your pilot was like, I got a 60 and I'm a pilot, you'd be like, no.
Don't fly me anywhere.
I do not want like a couple points over 50-50.
Right.
Like, no, thank you. But I truly believe that the reason for all the SOM shit was to keep their without unionizing, keeping the amount of money they can pull in at a certain level. And that's why you see so many like, if you see bad food and bev programs where the food and bev manager is a SOM, it's because of that. It's because they have this attitude about themselves. Like, I know so much about wine, and it's like, okay, and that's fine. Beer being the second, because beer is a combination of so many different, like you like, right? Like you have your yeast strains, you have your production, you have different malts, different hops, adjuncts, like you put fruit, you get like, so your ability to create something off in a beer is significantly more complicated. Like, right, like the second you enter from like, okay, we'll talk about it like this. Yeah. Okay, so if we're making a sandwich, wine is just like two pieces of bread, right? Yeah. Beer is like bread with like meat and cheese. Well, then you get into cocktails. And once you hit cocktails, you're like, okay, well, like, we can make anything. We can make tacos. We can make
what kind of bread am I using?
We can make anything. I can change every single thing. And so, the bartender's choice at Green Russell was, which I put on the menu, was, it's always the worst name for something because it's not the bartender's choice. It's always the choice of the drinker. But it goes to show it was like 65%. Like we did like 3.5 million was like our top year sales. We did 90% liquor. 65% of that was probably bartender's choice.
Wow.
I would tell you, like, I also would train bartenders this. I like them to train knowing classics as baselines, not as, like, I hated. Okay, so, like, I used to be, like, real mean. No, I've always been nice, but I used to be nuts. I hated when bartenders would come in with, like, an imbibe or, like, a trade mag and start pulling recipes from there. I'm like, they should be pulling recipes from you. Yeah. Like I had a product list of like 900 there, and I would teach bartenders, I'm like, you don't need to learn, like you need to learn classics, you need to learn how to make sours, you need to learn like these certain like sort of like fundamental points, like almost like a tripod, really. Like you have your sour bases, you have your spirit proportions, and then from there you have just like your general classic cocktails, and then that's what supports everything else. I tried to teach palates. Know how your mixers, not like mixers, it's a weird name, know how your modifiers interact with each other. Like how this bitter and that sweet, say, play. Like that was really where I went. And then also like it came down to, I'm not a big compound syrup guy. I like individual syrups, like ginger, black pepper, cardamom. You list them off. Like occasionally I would do like a lavender rose, because individually those flavor, like just straight lavender can be a little overwhelming, just straight rose can be overwhelming. But really I would never make more than like a 2-part syrup. Yeah. Because once you get into compound syrups,
you wouldn't do like a ginger honey.
No, ginger honey's fine. Yeah, but not ginger honey cinnamon.
Just like something that basically is that in spirit for a cocktail or whatever. Yeah.
And because the thing is once you get into compound syrups, you start losing your ability to utilize them like across the board in multiple different ways. And like, I mean, if I'm using 50%, if I'm using say half an ounce of syrup, I can do 2 quarters to build a compound. Yeah. Now that doesn't mean that, for certain cocktails you really want to blow it up. Sure, if you're doing a menu cocktail, you can go fucking nuts with it.
Yeah, just batch it all up anyways. Yeah.
But I'll tell you this right now, like, I mean, back in 2010, I would say when I opened Green Russell, And what we got, I could tell straight up that like the new level of drink, the new drinkers, the new real drinkers, we're going to give less and less shits about wine and more love to cocktails. And the reason is because, so when I first opened, we were seated in only cocktail bar. We had like 85 seats, and we would take groups of like 12, 14, and then we start getting all these bad reviews over like how long drinks take and all this shit. It's because a group of 12 would sit down and order 12 different cocktails,
right?
12 different bartender's choices. Like people want their own. They want what they want to drink. They generally know the things they like. Mm-hmm. And when you see that, like with like, 25 to 45-year-olds that are all drinking individualized.
Or even if you did a minute per cocktail, which would, if you're making a new cocktail, that'd be crazy.
But we were also
It's still
cutting
12
ice
minutes.
to order.
Right.
Oh my God.
So it's like even 2 minutes per cocktail. It's obviously you're starting to knock towards half an hour, but if they're not thinking about that and they're not, which I guess it would be more expected now because people are maybe a little more aware of how long a cocktail might take. But I mean, people get impatient. What is that? I mean, we talk about the perception of sitting there with just your water glass and like waiting.
Yeah.
Like people get that 1 minute is like 10 minutes to them. If
Yeah,
they don't.
If they're not perceiving what all is going into.
I mean, that's why you see. That's why you see pretty much batch programs across the fucking board. I mean, like literally, like I mean, you'll walk into Death and Co. This isn't a knock on Death and Co. And like, if you're ordering like a spirit forward cocktail, that thing, there's a goddamn great chance that thing is coming pre-diluted out of a freezer, pouring over. And that's not a knock. It's saying that cocktail's not perfect. Yeah. That just goes to show like what the public wants.
Yeah, you have to.
They're going to get.
You have to run the business. It has to make people have to want to come back and like write a good review and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, and because so many people are doing cocktails. Mm-hmm. Like I waited to start batching at Green Russell until like our 5th or 6th year. Wow. Because I had a whole thing about like seeing bottle touches, but then you get too big, and then you're like, not only are you too big, your fluctuations between weekends and weekdays. Yeah. So you need to be able to have like a bartender needs to be able to execute. And so I didn't go to a full batch program. Like we didn't batch our syrups. So it was just like spirits. We just batched spirits, which took away 3 to 4 touches. Sure. But like it's pretty wild to see like where the drinking industry is as a general. Like I think there was a Wall Street Journal report last week that was like there's too much wine and not enough wine drinkers. And it's like, to be completely honest, I'm not knocking wine, anything like that. Although if the only thing that existed was champagne, I'd be totally fine for the rest of my life. I would be okay with it. I'd be like, that's fine. I'll be all right.
Yeah.
Just like transitioning from kind of what you have done to what you are doing now, because we're currently in your bar, the L, in Denver, on I guess just south of First and Broadway.
It's
so
just
like
north of
First and Broadway.
It's really weird. This is like
But all of
we're in
Broadway's
the stretch of South Broadway called South Broadway, but we're technically
North Broadway.
North.
Yeah. But like, how did this is all you ran plenty of beverage programs, but this was more your baby. I don't know if you would call it that, but you designed all this. This is all you for the most part.
Yeah,
as far as I know, and obviously you have bartenders, so I guess they do.
Well, it's more about them at this point.
But like how, both being a businessman, wanting to have successful businesses, but also like having the passion that you have for drinks and everything. What was your process of landing on this and all that? What is?
Well, so so I in 2019 I found out that my previous business partner was not being a good business partner, and so I started to look for an out. That out was going to be me building my own bar. So I started putting that plan in motion probably around February 2019, and this space where the L is right now used to be my pet shop. So I knew of the space, and it had been on the market for like 2 years. So I meet up with the owner. I do a look through, and I was like, okay. It was like I had already spec'd out. Like I knew basically the amount of square footage I wanted. I knew roughly where I wanted to be. I've lived in the neighborhood for since 2009, so I kind of wanted to be on South Broadway. And then also the other thing is like I knew there'd be a change in drinking culture, like how fast that change came. Is still kind of up in the air because of COVID, but I knew at some point like a dive bar like would require you to be able to make a cocktail like a Negroni or a Sazerac,
which is, I mean, we're in that future right now.
Yeah,
That's what I would say generally people would expect, unless you like say we only do this. People kind of expect to get a Negroni or espresso martini or a bearded shot.
There's also a level of I think it happened with beer as well. I mean, we talked about like the pretentious nature of Psalms, unfortunately, and it was one of the reasons I was turned off by drinking wine for a long time, and why I got into craft cocktails and why I got into beer. But then there was this like snootiness in the beer crowd, and there was like crazy shit being made.
Yeah.
And then it was also happening with cocktails, and in the beer crowd now, people are making lagers again, making simplistic stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And the same thing with cocktails. It's like, dude, I don't need a smoked. Just give me a fucking really good cocktail, and then a shot of Fernet afterwards is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. In the beer industry, like, so I go to GABF every year with my family. I'm a beer drinker, like through and through.
Yeah.
And dude, there's nothing worse than like an overweight, bearded, like croc wearing, like cargo short in January dude shitting a sour down your throat. That's so. Like that could like strip the paint off of my car.
Acetone. It actually tastes like acetone.
Trying to tell me that that's what a good beer is. Like it's just not. Like
right.
you may like that, but this was the hard part with Green Russell's. Like we used to be called pretentious, and this is where like really the inception point of the L came from. I was like, I assure you, I was and still am as like salt of the earth as you can get. And that pretension in beer, I didn't like. And at Green Russell, like, yeah, we dressed up like fucking newsies. Like, I mean, like, we just did. But that was a period thing. That was a period thing.
Yeah.
It was, the idea was like we were trying to harken back to a time long ago where, people would like dress up and make drinks and like, and be professionals and like, and have this sort of interaction and not just be like, like when I bartended at McMurray's in college, man, I had such a crush on this girl I bartended with. Her name was Jen Britt, and you could still smoke in bars when I first started.
Right.
Dude, this chick was so gnarly. She could fucking smoke. She could pour drinks with two hands, smoking the entire time, and she could ash with her tongue, like above the ashtray, not bending over, like a 4-foot drop. And like I saw that and I was like, man, I'm gonna smell like cigarettes later. It never happened. I was too. She was like, she's like, I'll change you, and I'm like, I'm for the better, but it just didn't happen. She would only date bouncers.
Of course. Gin Brits out there somewhere prospering.
Yeah, I hope so, man.
Yeah, you don't have a long enough record to date me.
No, she was like, you are not enough, my boy.
And I was like, all the career is actually to become.
It's like, now I got it. But no, so like this idea of like the pretentious beer bar and the pretentious like cocktail person, like we were dressed nicely, but we were sitting here like, we'll make you a vodka soda if you want one. And that was the thing. I was like, I want to bring to my neighborhood and to like Denver in general. Like I opened the first cocktail bar in Denver. We were open about a year before Williams and Graham did, and which was awesome. I was like, the greatest thing that ever happened to me was Williams and Graham opening, because now there was context. We're all like fucking rising tide, brings up all ships, right? Like, so with the L, I wanted to try to be like the first like bar where you could come in, you could get like a shot and a beer for like $5-6. You could get a Negroni, you could get like our own house-made cocktails, like you could get a real drink made with like good ingredients, and you could still have this atmosphere that everyone was welcome. because I feel like before the L, you had two kinds of cocktail bars in this. Well, you only had one kind of cocktail bar in the city, and that was like high end, like mostly almost all seated only. And I wanted to bring something that was more like down to earth neighborhood, and like, you know, it was like interesting. Like we just got Westward top 100 bars, and and I was interested to see because they have two designations. One of them is cocktail bars and one of them is neighborhood bars, and we made it into the cocktail bar section. And so, which I understand, like I do understand we're a cocktail bar. I kind of view us, it's like I would, if we had been put in the neighborhood part, I'd probably be arguing that we should be a cocktail bar. So it's like pretty good, but like that's the idea. And so that's what I wanted to do.
Same
with
spot,
that.
both lists.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
where you would want to be.
Yeah. And so, anyways, that to me was the whole point of the owl, was just like kind of trying to bridge the gap between what had existed for basically like, you know, since my parents were drinking, which was just like all bars that you just go in and drink bars. Like, sure, there's like Irish pubs and all these other things. It's like, but the reality is like you have like dive bars, you've got sports bars, you've got restaurants, and then you've got cocktail bars. And so I wanted to be like, I think that like ultimately like I don't like the term dive craft. I think that's kind of a silly thing.
Right.
Sounds like an oxymoron.
Yeah, it does. But like I think you can be like, you can have that neighborhood style and still have like great cocktails and give people what they want.
Man, that blew me away. So that blew me away the first time I came here, because at the time Jacob was working at Postino down the street. I was managing there, and he told me about y'all, and I came in here and it was just blown away with that. Like, man, this feels relaxed. I can get a shot of beer after work, but you guys can actually make, you know, you can make me Last Word, you can make me a Negroni, you can make me any of these cocktails. My question being though, you also started becoming in the neighborhood kind of known as like the industry spot. If you were industry, is the spot you wanted to go to. Was that intentional, or was that like kind of natural?
No, it was very intentional. So in my previous life, you know, owner of like high-end cocktail bars, beverage director for like a large restaurant group, we were not very industry friendly. It's not to say that like I couldn't comp things or get people. Like, I mean, I could comp, you know, any meal I wanted to for anyone at any point nothing. It was just, it's like I actually like I'm very pro comp, and very loose with these sorts of things. But the idea of being an industry bar for me was really like, I came from a place where we didn't really do fuck all for industry. I didn't care for that approach. Okay. When it comes to marketing, like there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but I do believe that the best marketing you can get is by having a wide net of people that have enjoyed a bar or restaurant. Like I think you're gonna get, like if you're gonna go to a city, like sure you can look it up on Instagram, you can look it up on Google and all these things. But if you know somebody in the industry from there, the first thing you can do is you're going to ask them, and I guarantee you those are going to be the first recommendations you do. And so, like, I wanted to be an industry bar that was like truly industry, like all the time, like deals for industry, the things that industry likes to drink. Like we do industry Amaro for super cheap, like industry beer and shots, all of our cocktails. Like what, $7 I think for industry. Like basically be like, listen, you can come here, have a great time, and you're gonna come here probably on your days off. And like there used to be this place in Denver called Wazi's Supper Club. I think it might have been before both of your times. Yeah. Okay, it's now where A5 Steakhouse is. Okay. Anyways, they were a real true like phenomenal industry bar I used to go to. And they had like cheap pizzas and cheap beer, like $3 drafts, like, you know, $4 like Jamesons, that kind of thing. And it was like, and I love that. And you'd go there and you'd like, that's where industry went. And it was like, and then you know, people would be like, hey, we're going to, you know, Ball Arena. Where should we go after? Hey, go to Wazi's Supper Club. You have a great time. And like that kind of word of mouth is, I think, really, really helpful. Mm-hmm. So it is a bit of marketing. I mean, but also you know, the other thing about being in an industry bar is it takes care of my bartenders because industry tips really, really well. So it also ensures that my bartenders make, you know, really, really good money. That's very important. I've always looked at front of house employees the same way I look at like a gig employee, like an Uber or a Lyft driver. Like they're there as long as they're making money. And if they're not making money, then they're not going to be there anymore.
Right.
And it's like one of those things where it's like if you don't protect that, then you're going to lose that. And so that's just a general way in with which I've always sort of operated from. You know, there's more dynamics to it, obviously, once you get into a full service restaurant situation.
Sure.
but
yeah, I mean,
like,
with any business, I mean, if you're not prioritizing the people that work in the business, that all trickles up or down, however you want to view it, is like to success, right? Like those people wanting to be there or having a reason to be there. And for
absolutely.
almost everyone, if not ideally for everyone, I want to pay my rent. So like, how can I pay my rent?
Yeah.
It's like as much as like you liked hanging out at McMurray's, you needed to be able to pay your bills.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's why you were there.
Like it's not a nonprofit.
Right.
Like,
Right.
and like, you know, it's just so being an industry bar is more than just like it's more than just like something that I hoped for. Like I actively sought after it because the industry. I'm a big fan of the industry, of industry people, and of the world. And like, you know, I'm not like I've never been a good salesperson. So like, no matter what I ever did, I never upsell in restaurants and stuff like that. It's not who I am. I'm more like I look at things as an experience, and like having a great experience is always going to be something that I would hope. And if you can come in here and have a consistent experience and a good time, and if that experience is one that helps you after like a bad night or a long night or something like that, that's kind of where I come from with it.
Man, that's so cool. Well, you know, I saw it from the other end of what you were doing when I was managing was because you were taking care of my staff at the time, like so well here, and they always wanted to go here. At the time, we were just beer and wine over at Postino.
Yeah.
Anytime somebody was like, hey, man, we're looking for a place to get a cocktail, every single employee in my restaurant was, just walk a block down to the L, bro. Like, that's where you need to go.
Same with us. We'd be like, the only place you can get a good meal on Broadway is Postino.
Man, yeah, dude. Those like the handshake deals between industry spots. It's like, you know, it's a deeper nature and shows how cool our culture can be within the industry.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I agree. Yeah.
I mean, that was why. It was definitely one of the main reasons we wanted to talk to you first, just because this whole thing we're doing, this whole podcast, the reason we're talking on mics under lights right now is like industry bars is something that, I mean, my experience coming here the first time, me and a friend of mine, Alex, which also worked at Postino.
That's right.
You know Alex.
I know.
We were literally, we were just like going to, because he had cocktail bartended in DC, and we were like, let's just go to bars and around where we work and find a bartender that we can ask for an industry sour, and like they'll just make it. Like they don't ask what it is. We were like, if we can find the bartender that does that, then like we know we found a great bar. And of course, like we walked in Aiden, which I don't know, you probably maybe he could be viewed in the background of the video there. It was an awesome experience. I remember because he was like, "Oh, I can do an industry sour, but have you ever heard of a nuclear daiquiri?" Like it was just like that immediate like experience of like, you know, like not only knowing what we were talking about, but like having a bunch of just crazy shit in his back pocket that he'd be like, "Oh, you guys are like drink cocktail guys. Like, have you ever had this? You ever had this? Let's do this."
Yeah.
You know who owns this place? Like it's just like immediately like, brought us in. And that was for me. That's, I don't know if there's a singular definition for an industry bar other than a bar that industry workers go to.
Yeah, I mean, no.
Ideally, that usually gives a discount to an industry person, right?
Yeah.
That's usually part of it as well.
But I think,
like,
I mean, I think at this point, you know, there's always a place to go get like fucked up, right? Like that could be an industry bar, but like day in, day out, you don't always want to do that. I think you'll find more often than not, like if you were to put like a similar style bar to the L in any like large conglomeration of restaurants, I think this is the type of bar that would become like the industry bar.
Yeah.
Like because it offers the things that people want, which is not just a beer and a shot. Like those things are great. I'm not like I would take a beer and a Fernet.
That's usually me,
yeah,
just because I spend all night making cocktails. I'm like, I've tasted plenty of cocktails today.
Yeah, but Amani's going to come in here. He wants to make sure he can get himself a nice cocktail. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
Casey lives. He's like, well, I'm gonna start with an espresso martini.
Absolutely, and then I'm going to move on to exactly, man. Yeah, dude, that's so fascinating. I think like my next question is, we've had conversations in our previous topic episodes of like how important it is for managers and owners to operate in a way that they maintain their employees, that they keep the same employees, that they don't see them as a revolving door. And since I've been coming here, you guys have, for the most part, the same bartenders, and the ones that have left, it seems like it's just for other endeavors. How do you maintain that culture?
Well, I mean,
or build that culture?
So, it's a little weird here in Denver in general because of where our minimum wage is. The minimum wage is so incredibly high. Like, I'm not anti-minimum wage. I'm anti-tipped minimum wage. Like, I would have more employees if minimum wage were lower. I feel like it hurts full service tipped employees. I think we've lost jobs because of it. I know we have. But with like getting out of that political spectrum, again, looking at it trying to make sure that people aren't overworked, trying to make sure that everything's as like equal and even as possible, like weekend splits, making sure I believe in tip pooling. Like, okay, for instance, so I do work I consult in Idaho, and they run an more old school restaurant styling where they don't tip pool. People are like on their own table sections. And, I've had this conversation with them many times. We have a very, very good open working relationship. I'm like, you guys should go to tip pool. Like, yes, a few of your employees will make a little bit less money, but in general, everybody will make more money. And I was like, also, you'll see people working together in teams. And so, ensuring, ultimately, culture is, not that we don't have a culture here, but when you have, we don't have lineups because, I'll have, one bartender during, the most weekdays and things of that nature. But when you just, when everybody can kind of openly speak to each other and everybody's making enough money at their at that hourly clip, that's how you maintain. And that's, I think, the larger a space gets, or that's the hardest thing, is maintaining. And I think I always say this, if you want to, if a chef wants to keep more staff, then they should maybe buy one less car a year or something like that. When you see turnover, it can be a couple things. Money is typically the first one. For good money, people will put up with a lot. They just will. That's just how the world works.
That's how steakhouses stay open.
Fear Factor taught us that. You want to hoss down 9 inches of elk dick for $25,000. I'm like, anyways, plenty of people would do that. So for money, it's been proven that people will do pretty much anything. But day in, day out, trying to make sure that everybody has what they need is the best hope, and not taking things too hard. I'm not a micromanager. I used to be a micromanager. It's not healthy. I would do something differently than somebody else. And if I have an expectation that everyone's going to work like me, then I'm going to ultimately fail. The recognition that nothing's perfect, nor should you strive for perfection. Striving for perfection, in my opinion, is really, really bad fool's errand. I've worked with some people rather that would strive for perfection, and you will just be so sad and angry and frustrated because your ideal is impossible. And so the way I look at things is I track sales and tip percentage. I track reviews, and as long as those things stay in line, then everybody's doing a good job. You know what I mean? I give people the ability to comp whatever they want. If it's over a certain percentage or they get a tip over a certain percentage, I ask for an explanation. Mm-hmm. That's it. Like, you know,
just keeps it honest.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like, so, like, because what's going to happen is like, I don't really believe that most, like, I am like a very like trusting person in general. Like, if I shake somebody's hand and talk to them for 5 minutes, I feel like I have a good understanding of whether or not I can trust them. Mm-hmm. And so first off, like, hiring like that is important. Giving people the ability to be themselves and to take care of those they feel they should be able to take care of is really important. Because whether or not you say to do it or not, they will still do it. Like, I worked with a bar manager at Osteria that he had the ability to comp anything he wanted, but he would just like bring out meat and cheese plates for people all the time just by like hand firing them. And I was like, put it on the bill. Yeah, like, and he's like, no, we'll get more money. I go, no, we won't. Like, if people are going to tip better, they're going to tip better. Like, if they see how much, like, you've just given them, like, I truly believe, like, so here I'll be like, listen, if somebody orders a drink and you're going to take care of it, I want you to comp it on their bill.
Yeah, so they can see, I got $15 off or whatever.
I go, if you're going to buy shots for people or drinks for people that you're just doing, I was like, then I want it on your comp tab. Mm-hmm. Like, so this is how I want to track it. Because I truly believe when people see that discount in front of them, they're going to tip better.
Absolutely.
Like, I like the idea that, like, people have an inherent idea of value. Like, I don't really believe they do. And so, like, having it, and even if they do, having it in front of them is even a better idea.
It's a reminder.
So anyways, so I think that's like, you know, so by not being crazy and micromanaging is how I've been able to do it. And like, yeah, and then, you know, I've only fired one person in 5 years here.
Wow, that's impressive as hell.
And he got fired. He thought he got fired for a different reason. But like, I came in here on like a Sunday morning and I had the bathrooms were just like a fucking mess. And I was like, I made who the fuck closed last night? I knew who the fuck closed. I had made it very, very clear. I'd made it very, very clear that the bathroom, like, you know, coming out of COVID, it was like different things. You couldn't have too many high expectations and all this other stuff. So I started like, you know, so I would clean and then slowly but surely started, you know, instilling more, you know, kind of normalized rules because our labor is so expensive. Like the expectation of what you would have out of an employee, like even 7 years ago, is completely different than like sort of what small businesses can afford now. And but it was like, okay, we're now to the point where, you know, bartenders, you're now responsible for cleaning, like making sure that the bathrooms are completely clean. And I walk in and it's just like fucking disgusting. And I was like, that's it. I was like, you know. So he ended up losing his job because of that. And so that's the only person I had to fire. It was for dirty bathrooms. Wow. And I was like, yeah. And I do say this. I do take pride in having very nice I don't like.
Oh, that's important, man. Bars need bathrooms.
Yeah, but I don't like.
You gotta be.
I don't love. It's not that I don't mind. I like almost explicitly go to dive bars when I travel. I don't mind like a fucking disgusting bathroom. However, a bar with an absolutely fucking trash, disgusting bathroom would never be my daily drinker.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the bathroom thing for me.
Yeah, dude.
It's like if you're going to be a neighborhood daily drinker, like you got to have a respectable bathroom.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you have respectable bathrooms here.
If I walk in to a bathroom of any establishment and there's no like soap, you know, like that's such a red flag that I'm just like, I'm out of here, dude.
Dude,
like,
we have such nice bathrooms. This little girl, this like 5'1" girl walked in one day. Just walks in. We just opened like 4:05. Walks in, doesn't say a word, looks straight ahead. Absolutely. I don't know how many days it had been since she had a bowel movement, but It had been, and she was. There's no way she was a vegan. And like she used the back bathroom, so that's a solid like 30 feet from like nose to bathroom.
Yeah.
She just walked right out. I was like, oh man, I was like, apparently we have bathrooms nice enough that you're willing in front of 2 employees and no one else to walk in shamelessly, destroy it, leave the door open. Like it has a bathroom fan, keep it shut. Like at least it's not a surprise anybody wants, but at least there's a chance. No, it's like everybody knows. Like it was like, and it's like, you know, pig pen and fucking peanuts. Like you can, like it's just like see the smells following her. That's how nice her bathrooms are. She was willing, like, dude,
willing to do as much damage as possible.
Yeah, and like shamelessly, just like she was like she knew we knew. We know you know.
We know. Has she returned? I'm
sure probably used the bathroom.
Yeah.
Different hours.
Yeah, you heard it here. The best bathrooms on Broadway.
Very poopable.
Yeah, very poopable.
Well, I wanted to hit you with one more thing because I don't want to disrespect your time.
No, I'm doing great.
Just the name, the L. I feel like that's the big question I hear when they're like, "You come here a lot." I'm like, enough. I come here frequently enough. Yeah. This is my industry spot personally. The name, the L. What is the inspiration?
Yeah. So my favorite question I got a ton when we first opened was lesbian bar.
Well,
and I was like, and it was like, well, the L word, and I was like, yeah, okay, sure, I guess, okay.
Yeah.
So it's like, no, not a lesbian bar, but it is. We are the LG, all the letters and all the numbers friendly, super friendly.
I've seen some super successful queer community.
Oh yeah, our queer engagement is pretty, and that's the other thing. The other thing about like high-end cocktail bars and pretension and all that shit is like a neighborhood bar should be open to, like, I always said, like, we had rules at Green Russell and people would complain about them all the time. And the biggest thing was like, we really only have one rule: be cool. Like that's the idea. Like we're just here to be cool. We're here to be like a bar for everyone. During COVID, I supported like, small businesses with like a pop-up market. I didn't charge anything. Because I think that all those things are really, really, really important for like a local neighborhood bar. But the L came from the idea that my favorite, so I traveled to New York a bunch. I've been to Chicago a number of times. And the L train that connects Brooklyn and Manhattan, I think some of the coolest bars in America are off the L train. And then, even though it's the elevated train in Chicago, it pays homage, like off the L, you can travel to all the cool neighborhoods of Chicago. And I used to hear all the time back in the day, people being like, Denver's just like a small New York. And I'm like, it's just not.
There's no way it could be.
It's not even like a small New York. Like, I'm like, there are blocks in New York that are cooler than like all of Denver. Like, I mean, like there are neighborhoods that like Denver could never hope to be that cool. And so it's kind of like kind of a kitschy joke that was like, well, I'm going to open a bar that like reminds me of New York or Chicago bars. And that's the thing, it's not based off of any in particular bar I'd ever been to in Chicago or New York. It's based off of my experiences in those cities and the idea that like, I wanted to, I'm here today because of experiences I've had in those cities, and I wanted to bring that to an idea I had of a more modern styled bar.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Just taking that inspiration. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we really...
Thank you so much, dude.
Thank you. I feel like we touched on a bunch of stuff we can talk for other hours about, so...
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yeah, man.
I'll talk to you any other time. We'll talk about asshole Psalms or
yeah, it's really funny.
More cocktails or whatever. Anytime.
It's really funny. Like, I'll tell you my favorite like Psalm story. Okay, so we're just real fast. So this is a master Psalm, and he was talking to the head of Riedel, like the glassware company, like the head, like the president of Riedel. He was in town. And for those that don't know, like Riddell is like, if you go to a really nice restaurant, they're like, they make cheap glasses, but they also make extremely like fine crystal glasses and stuff like that. And that's what he was there talking to him, and he's sitting at my bar, and he's like, yeah, he's like, I'll be honest, he's like, I became a master som bet. He's like, in like the 80s. He's like, it was nothing. He's like, I wasn't smart. He's like, I didn't go to college. He's like, I just started working at a nice restaurant. I met this guy. I took these tests, and it was like, yeah, they're like, yeah, you're good. You're good. And he's like, and that's kind of how it works. And he's telling like the head of, I'm like, I'm right here. And then he orders a defibrillator, which, if you're not familiar, is just a shot of espresso with a shot of reposado tequila in it. And I'm like, that's just awful. Like, it's just, it doesn't taste good. I don't understand it. I've tried it, and I just go, just give me some reposado tequila neat. Yeah. And just give me a shot of espresso. Like, why are you ruining both my reposado tequila and my espresso at the same time? Because it just ends up being like really poorly. And I was like, and it's a master som. That's
a guy
sitting
whose
there.
entire title is a taste base.
Yeah, drinking, just rocking it back.
Man,
Gross.
Amazing.
Anyways, but yeah. So, anyways, shout out to all the soms out there, sawing the line, keeping their like. It's like a union without a union. Anyways, they're good people.
Shout out to you, Adam.
Yes,
sir.
Once again,
Chad.
check out his bar, the L, 46 North Broadway on South Broadway.
On South Broadway.
That's right.
Yeah.
Guys.
Great place. We'll link the all the links will be when we have the episode posted and everything. And really appreciate your time. Great chatting.
Yeah, dude.
No, thank you guys. It was awesome, Jacob, Chad. Seriously.
We should close up with a shot for net here.
Let's do it.
That's what we
Yeah.
should
All
do.
right. Sure. Yeah. For net, bro.
All right, guys.
Absolutely. All right, guys. God, man.